my entrepreneurial podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sethu Meenakshi Sundaram. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Bang on.
Thank you. I'll be honest, Sethu, I practiced a little bit, so I'm glad to hear it kind of paid off. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Sethu is the CEO and co-founder of Zluri. I hope I'm saying that right as well. Zluri. It's a software asset management platform, a SaaS app, for those of you out there familiar with that. Sethu, thanks for joining me. Really, want to dive right in. As I mentioned, you're in the software asset management space. I'm kind of curious, well, for the few people that do watch this, if you wouldn't mind, telling us about what that actually means and, kind of your background and how you got into the software asset management space.
Sure, Eric. So let me start by explaining what software asset management is for people who don't know that. So I think in the world of on-premise software, I think we had the biggies like Oracle, SAPs of the world dominating that. And the deal values and the customers used to pay about $3 million, $5 million, right? And there used to be audit done by these companies to make sure that it's being used for what it's being said it's being used for. So because it was not cloud-based, there was no way to control it. So audit used to be a part of it as well. So companies always used to be wondering how are they using the platform, whether are they using it correctly or are they not using it correctly. So if they've not been using it correctly, then during an audit, they had to end up paying a lot more money as well. So optimization of the platform and also the usage of the platform was pretty much a question mark. So that's how the whole industry of software asset management came about, where it was all about how do you manage a software asset in the right manner. So that is a multi-million-dollar industry out there. There are quite a few biggies. But interestingly, when we started Zluri, we didn't even know this category existed, and that's the truth, right? What started off for us was the fact is that all of us were missing subscriptions as founders, and we realized that there is no way to manage it, right? And I'm not sure, Eric, how many subscriptions you own. So I used to own about 15 to 18. Any guesses how much you own?
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that, just for no other reason than just because you said that and pointed it out to me. I guess if we weren't talking about this and I just thought randomly, I might say like 5 or 6, but it's probably more than that.
That's right. So on average, a consumer uses about 11 subscriptions, and in fact, I was about the average. That's when we realized that companies are now moving more towards cloud applications, which is being delivered to them in a subscription manner or a usage-based manner. And the whole on-premise world is getting displaced by cloud-based software in a much rapid fashion. That by 2027, Bessemer Venture Partners predicted that 100% of the business software would be on the cloud. Now, which means software asset management becomes meaningless at that point because it was built for the on-premise world. That's when we realized that the whole game of software asset management is becoming SaaS management, or to simply put, how do you manage subscription softwares better? And I think that's why we decided to build a product to solve that problem, which also becomes a problem of sizes of all companies, right, from 10 employees to 10,000 employees. And that's how we started to build Zluri.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like you have all these, as you mentioned, you had 15, 16 subscriptions, and they're all kind of on like, auto bill. And then you look at your credit card statement for something you're paying for monthly or annually, and you're hit with this charge and you don't even remember what that is. Because you forgot to cancel during the 7-day trial or whatever. And businesses are facing a similar challenge. I mean, maybe not on like auto renew the same way you and I with our personal subscriptions might be, but they get these big contracts that'll come up. I mean, I know I've sold SaaS software, so it'll be like 1 to 3 year contracts. They can be tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands, even millions. And they're coming up, and they're they're wondering, like, are we getting true value out of this? Like, do we want to renew this, or do we need to pare back the license or even grow the license? It sounds like you guys really kind of help them figure that out. Am I kind of getting to the heart of it all?
I think you're able to articulate it better than me, so thank you for that. So
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
you articulated better than me the whole problem statement. So thank you.
Well,
So
that's what I'm trying to do here, writing and broadcasting, is try to articulate things. It's if there's one skill I've got, I guess it's words. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
sure. So probably I'll add a fact, Eric, to what you just said. So any guesses? Um, how many SaaS applications a 200 employee company in the US uses? Any idea?
If I had to get, I'd say a few dozen at least.
You're way off the mark. It's about 150 applications.
Wow, no kidding.
And
For
I'm
200
serious.
people.
For 200 people. And okay, so another context, right? So at Zluri, we are about close to 15 people now, right? And the
Hmm.
number of applications we are using already is about 52.
It's about 52.
That's right.
Oh, wow. For 12 people.
For about 15. So I think
Oh,
if I were
15,
to
I'm sorry.
compare the number of employees we hire and the number of softwares we hire to get the work done, then I think we have hired more softwares than people.
Wow, that's crazy to think about. I mean, I guess as a business grows, maybe the softwares you use scale up, so it's maybe fewer than one app per person. But even the ratio you gave me, 150 apps to 200 people. I mean, that's basically what is that? 4 people to every 3 apps. That's a pretty crazy ratio. I'm used to like Salesforce, Workday, I guess not. Well, yeah, Okta, whatever, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's so I use a few myself, but there's a lot of people all on those platforms. So it's just kind of mind-boggling to me that it could have so many apps in proportion to the amount of people at a company.
Yes. So in fact, the thing is, every department in a company today has its own stack. The whole
Hmm.
terminology is your sales stack, what's your marketing stack, what's your tech stack, and that stack is endlessly growing, right? And I think that's never end to it. And also this is how I define it. For every problem out there, the solution is a SaaS software. I mean,
Mm.
and I think okay, so let's take a step back, right? So
Sure.
earlier, how the world of software evolved, right? Earlier, when companies had a problem and they decided the software a solution for it, they decided to build it by themselves, right? And it took a lot
Hmm.
of effort and money. And then came the whole IT outsourcing boom, who said, hey, you know what? If you were to build a software in house, it's going to cost a lot of time, money, and effort. Just give it to us. It'll cost you lesser and much shorter. And hey, it's very cost effective. And that's how IT outsourcing boom took over the world in the 90s to 2000s, right? But today, the third evolution is the fact that both options are expensive in nature. So any
Hmm.
problem that you don't have to build, you don't have to outsource. Just go to Google and search a problem. There's probably somebody somewhere has made a software for that available at a subscription model. So I think that's the biggest change that's happened over the last 10 years or so, a decade. And I think thanks to Salesforce for pioneering that in 2000, but I think it took steam in 2010 onwards. And I think that boom has made sure that people, or rather any agile company or any new age company, quickly goes on a Google and say, hey, okay, how about problem? Okay, there's software, let's buy it. And that's the reason why there is too much of software in a very short time.
Yeah, no, it's and when you peel back a little more, it's really easy to understand why the drive is around buy, not build, unless it's really your bread and butter. It's hard to build something that delivers the return on investment that a company that's like Salesforce, for instance, that's specifically dedicated to making CRM. I mean, it's easy to kind of onboard and ramp up the use of the software. It's hard to build something as good as they would build. Not to mention over time, it gets harder and harder. I mean, you get developers that leave the company, for instance. You get new developers that aren't familiar with what you've built, and getting them to, continue to build on top of that, to continue to iterate, only becomes more challenging versus something like Salesforce, where they permanently got Salesforce-ready developers building and improving the product.
That's right. Interestingly, I've also heard, I read this recently. I think JC Penney filed for bankruptcy, right, about last year mid during the pandemic. And I think, I'm not sure who, but a couple of equity investors actually bought JC Penney over. And when they took over, they said, hey, you guys have built the entire platform from the ground up. I don't think it's necessary. Let's buy the whole commerce cloud from Salesforce and let's start building on top. We're good to go from day one. So suddenly, you have 100 developers, for example. I don't need 100. Let's say goodbye to about 80 of them. With the 20 techies, let's build on top of Salesforce. And that's going to be cost effective in the long run for them as well. And I was like, wow, right?
Yeah, they basically had like their CRM, like kind of marketing tech functions kind of in-house. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes. So in fact, for JC Penney, the brand is all it is, right? Technology is supporting angle. So they said, why should you build that from ground up? That's not an IP at all in a way. So let's get that from Salesforce and let's invest heavily on the front end, which is the marketing and the branding.
I guess that would explain a lot. I've heard JCPenney is struggling as a brand, so if they're maybe that's reflective, at least in part, of some of their decisions around how to use technology for the business. They were still using legacy methods of providing the right technological applications. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by
that. True.
Well, thank you for kind of fleshing out the whole concept of software asset management. I appreciate that personally because I've heard of it, but I've never really dove into it. It's I've worked around different solutions, so it's good to learn about that. What I'm kind of curious is, I want to sort of dive into your experience as an entrepreneur. I guess let's start with the burning question. What do you consider really to be the greatest challenge or the most challenging aspects so far that you've faced?
I think, broadly put, I think it's selling the idea of what you think is the best idea to others, right from your to investors, to early employees, to your co-founders. I think that's the challenging part. And I think truth is, I think as a co-founder, you're always selling. That's a reality. It's just that it's not the product always, but you're selling something or the other, right? So it's interesting that I tried hiring. I think so. Zluri is now funded, by the way. So we raised our seed round, but before.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But before that, we were hiring, and it was very difficult. So to give you, my tech co-founder and I had done close to 200 interviews to hire 6 people.
Wow, really?
That's mind-numbing, right? And we were willing to offer decent pay, right? We weren't asking to take a cut. Even by that, we had difficulties, right? So it's funny how a 22-year-old was extremely talented. So when I was talking to him, it was reverse. Basically, I wasn't interviewing him. He was interviewing me, and he asked me to present my pitch deck and the vision of the company. And then he chose to join us. So, right? I mean, you get what I mean? It was a very different position for me to be there. I'm like, hey, at all times, being an entrepreneur is at the beginning of the receiving end. But I've now gotten used to enjoying it. So I'm ready to pitch all the time.
So yeah, that's pretty interesting. Like, you're offering the job here, yet it feels like he's got all the leverage. He's got really. You guys were really particular about who you hired. You needed a particular kind of person, and that's why you were so selective. It sounds like you said 6 out of 200 interviews, so 3% of people. I don't know. I don't have any data about hiring practice, but I kind of suspect that sounds kind of low.
True. And also, there was certain, so to give an example, so our first hire, we wanted to hire a product manager right, for us, because none of the three co-founders have a. I mean, while we can think product, we're not product managers by our career. So we wanted
Hmm.
somebody to fill the role. So we interviewed many people and finally offered to someone. And just the day before joining, he said, "Hey, you know what? I don't like the designation product manager. I want to be the chief product officer." Now, that was not going with the ethos because we don't want title inflation from day one because that's wrong culture for the company. So we said we can't. Then he said, "Then I don't think I'll join you guys." And we could have compromised and said, "Okay, come over, I will give you what you want." But guess what? We said no. I think let's not compromise on certain things, and he walked away. I think these are some things that we want to set in stone right from day one, so that we don't cause issues as we scale up rapidly in the days to come. So I think those kind of ethos and cultures, how we want to build the company, also matters in our hiring. That's also one reason why it's only 3% success rate for us.
Yeah, but I admire that you stuck to your convictions there, because the thought I had when you started talking about the guy wanted, an inflated title, it doesn't. My immediate reaction was, oh, that's not a big deal, whatever, I give it to him. But then, as you kind of explained the importance of, saying you want to set in stone the culture you're trying to build, it then dawned on me that that's probably not the right perspective. It's for the people you hire, for the company you're trying to build, it's more profitable, I think, in the long run to get the kind of people you want and kind of set the tone that you want. Otherwise, you run the risk of the organization growing, kind of outside of the guardrails you've set, metastasizing into something, you can no longer control. So I think I think it's great you guys, really understood that right from the beginning.
Yep, and I think we got lucky as well, because when we hired another product manager after that, I think he was really good, and I think probably something that's not meant to come is not meant to come because something else better is waiting for you, I guess. So I think it worked in our favor as well.
Yeah, there's a good lesson in there. You could get, whether it's an employee, even a deal, let's say, for a lot of money, but don't force it, right? Because there's going to be more opportunity. You don't need that guy specifically. There are other great product managers out there you can get. I've even heard of early startups, that will sometimes turn down deals because they're like, the terms, the work involved, it's not a good long-term fit for the company. And that's okay, because you'll find deals that are, and that you'll profit from. And again, tying it back to what you're talking about with hiring the right people, that product manager might have great experience, but there are other guys just like him that will not need an inflated title. So be patient, I guess, is a good takeaway. But so you originally said selling was kind of the big challenge. Now, I guess it's like, do you feel like you've kind of, I won't say mastered, but gotten a better grip on hiring, and that's why, like, now the focus is kind of on selling, and why you consider that the greatest challenge you're facing?
No, I think so. I have always been in the selling side of things. I mean, I've been started my career as somebody who was selling as an individual contributor. Then I became the chief officer eventually for Southeast Asia in my last assignment. So I've grown the ranks of being in sales. I think selling is not difficult because I think you show value, customers say they like it, there's a pricing, they agree, and you move on. I think it's easier in my head. That's not really the challenge. I think hiring is and will always be the challenge for us. If it's going to be
Gotcha.
today, I think in the future it'll be to hire people who have 10 or 12 years of experience, and eventually it'll be to hire leaders to grow the company. I think hiring will always be the challenge, and I've written in detail about that in one of my blogs as well. That it doesn't matter what happens, hiring is always the hardest part of the startup, and not really selling.
Gotcha. Okay, maybe I misunderstood you. Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I've been in sales, and I wouldn't call it easy, but you are right in that the crux of it is really to get down to provide value. And if you can effectively do that, as the saying goes, at least here in the United States, I don't know if they have it in India where you're located, but the product sells itself. So not to reduce things too much, but I can relate to what you're saying. I guess, kind of building off that, your company's still fairly new, but has anything happened really that you totally just did not expect?
So interestingly, so it's funny. So we did not go to too many investors.
Hmm.
We got quite lucky, I would say. I think we met a few investors and we already got commits. So we stopped the pitching to investors part and we went on to building products and meeting customers. Right. And the moment the press release got out of our funding, I think we probably got inbound requests from 25 different VCs, and I think around the world. And they said,
Wow.
doesn't matter, still have room, we'll come for the same valuation. We're like, wow, okay. That was surprising because this is the first time my co-founders and I are out there building our own stuff and raising funds. Right, we've not done that before, and looks like this was a space a lot of people looking at. They didn't know who we're building. The moment the news went out, we got requests from the US, Europe, a couple of Asian funds. So that was surprising to us. At least it said the idea of working on is actually crucial. So a lot of people have said that if you're raising the next follow-on round, they're willing to come on board. So I think really excited to execute to get to the next stage. So I think that's something we never expected.
Well, that's the great kind of surprise, right? It's a very positive. So, that's glad to hear that it was, it was good rather than, an uh-oh kind of moment. So it sounds like to me, like I know, having learned a little bit about how VCs kind of source their deals. And by the way, what you described is definitely, I'm sure any founder would consider unexpected, because usually finding investment is not very easy. It's not a walk in the park. But what was I going to say? You just had something great. I mean, I know VCs evaluate based on product and team in general. Those tend to be the highest criteria, and clearly they helped you validate that the product was, as you said, crucial, really necessary. So that was a pretty early big win for you guys, I imagine.
It sure was.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that momentum's really building. I am kind of curious. Again, it's still fairly new, but is there anything you kind of wish you knew going into this, or just anywhere along the journey that you didn't?
It's an interesting question, Eric. So I think I was thinking about this, right? So from a learning perspective, all of us have uh, proper resources to learn to become a doctor, probably a lawyer, and for anything in the world. But I don't think there is a proper learning or a curriculum, not the right word to say, but at least entrepreneurship around the world is similar, right? In terms of, I think for an entrepreneur, you've got to learn to know how to read term sheets, learn how to read legal documents, and when you go fundraise, what you should take care of. These are all can be made into some sort of a reading or a course, if I may say that, right? So we just went onto the internet and learned about all of this. But even when we got into the process, it took a lot of time for us, and we weren't ready for. There's one thing I really wish I had access to is what I should be prepared for while getting into an entrepreneur and raising funds. I think I would have been better prepared for it. And unfortunately, your fellow entrepreneurs who are willing to help you also can't share more details because of certain restrictions that they themselves have. So I think in that sense, we took stuff available on the internet, but I think when it came and hit us, we were scrambling for help. So yeah, I think I wish entrepreneurship becomes more curriculumized, if you use that word, to a certain extent, so that people don't have to be fully fearful when they start up a company, and rather they would have gone through the grill once in a safe environment.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that seems like an interesting potential idea even for an entrepreneurial endeavor. Kind of reduce that learning curve for entrepreneurs, so they can focus on building the product and building the company, not reading term sheets and sending out pitch decks and stuff like that. That's I kind of thought it that just germinated in my head. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm kind of curious on a more positive note. What have you enjoyed the most about your journey so far?
So I think what I enjoyed is two things, right? One is something in your head as an idea is finally become a product, and your customers say that, hey, this actually solved my problem. And to think about the fact that 6 months before it was just in my head, but
Mm,
today it's it's alive, it's breathing in a way, right?
yeah.
It's solving the problem. I think that's unmatched. I think probably it's that joy that lets you go through every day, even if it's difficult, right? Per se. That's one. And second one, which I've loved about my role as an entrepreneur, is to give jobs to people, right? And
Mm,
I think that's super empowering, and also gives a responsibility that during hard days you really want to keep going because there are people who trusted you and joined the company, while they had tons of options. And I think these two things help me feel so good about what I'm doing.
yeah, they sound, I mean, those sounds like great feelings. One word I kind of picked up on that it really stood out to me was that you said empowering. Going from something just in your head to like a real product. It's like a created, to really make a dream kind of manifest. And that sounds very empowering. There's a certain kind of power in creating something out of essentially nothing. So I think that first point is definitely very relatable. And who doesn't like, the warm and fuzzy feeling of providing for people the pathway to, their kind of dreams, or helping them provide for their needs that come through hiring and providing jobs. So I think those are both very, relatable. I don't want to say common, but definitely, again, relatable rewards of entrepreneurship. Um, my next question, it might be kind of a difficult one, it's one that I think it definitely could be helpful for anyone wanting to learn about entrepreneurship. You're the first family man I've interviewed since I've started doing this, and for a lot of people, that's a lot of the reasons people might not want to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. They can create all kinds of reasons. Most of them aren't very good, but being concerned about your family is a pretty good reason. I mean, there's risk in entrepreneurship, and that's a big responsibility. So I'm kind of curious what you thought about as a man. What, you have three children? Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a son. He's 3 years old.
Oh, you just the son. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. I thought I must have gotten confused. You must have told me before you had a 3-year-old son, and that my memory got a little befuddled, and I thought you had three kids. But anyway, so you have a wife, you have a son. I guess what were some of the thoughts going through your head as you decided to do this, take on this risk as a family
Great. So I think what helped me. I think it's important to understand the whole context, right? So in fact, um, my parents are about 60, and my wife's parents are also about 60, right?
man?
But one good thing for us, the baseline is, even though they're about 60, they're not dependent on us for their expenses or their living today. So
Hmm.
thankfully, so that's like the foundation for me, right? They're not dependent on their son or my wife parents. They're not dependent on her for their expenditures. So that clears one responsibility for me. That's one. And
Gotcha.
number two, so when I make decisions, I always think that you shouldn't have liabilities or taken on any debts personally. Otherwise, that's going to hinder your decisions. And thankfully, my wife and I had cleared up our liabilities, and we were debt free since the last 6 months. Right. So that's point number two. And point number three, I think the son being 3 years old is isn't complicated at this point in time, because I know when he turns 7 or 8, then that expenses shoot up as well. But today, expense for him is also pretty limited, right?
Mm,
Fourth is my wife and I discussed about this. When she heard the idea, she said, "Hey, this is worth pursuing, but are you really going to do it?" Right? Then I asked her, right? Hey, in our current jobs, if we were to stay for her, she works as well, so both of us. What would we do? We would probably own up 2 houses. We would own up a few assets. And Indians have a love for gold, so we would own some gold. And
sure.
you're 60 years old. What does it? What do you do with all of that? It's pretty meaningless, right? We would want to look at our lives and look at what we've experienced, what we've done, and I think what puts us in a very sad state is things that we've not done in the past. And I think that's true for whatever age you live in, right? And 60 is just going to get far more magnified of stuff that you didn't do. So I said, now with all of this clear, there can never be a better time for me to start up. Even if 2 years, 3 years later, if we fail, at best, what we wouldn't have done is wealth creation for the 3 years. That's about it, right? That doesn't affect
Yeah.
our long term at all. So, so I give me this 3 years, and I think I will go through this, come out alive, and hopefully a little successful. Then great. If not, that's still okay as well. And I think 3 years is a pretty long time to understand where your startup is heading as well. And she agreed to it,
Sure.
and she said she's willing to support. And when all of this happened, we were in Singapore, by the way, right? So which means we had to take a flight amidst the pandemic back to Bangalore to build this, which means there are too many things to go through and all of that. But I think she supported wholeheartedly, and she did not she did not agree. She accepted. There's two big difference, right? So that helped me, and I think we moved back to Bangalore to build this, right? So I think this overall explanation, I think, will give you a context why it isn't as difficult as it would seem, because probably I'm in a better position and was able to do it. So, and also, just to add to this, right, I would like to strike a parallel now. When you're trying to start up, it's easy to just move on and say, hey, I want to do this, screw everything else.
Yeah.
This is just forget it, but anything, if you're single, it's something else, right? End of the day. But
Yeah.
I think it's wrong because uh, think of think of take an example of a kite, right, flying
Hmm.
very high. Now, you would think that, hey, the kite is not able to fly higher because it's controlled by the thread. Why don't we just cut the thread out and the kite can keep flying high, right? But in most cases, we cut out the thread, the kite just goes and gets stuck in a tree. That's about it. It's the end of it. It doesn't fly. So the way I think about it is that that whole thread is actually a family, or that keeps you in control, the constant, as I would call it, right? So it's important that you convince them, make them agree, they full-heartedly support you. Then I think you as a kite can keep flying higher and higher, and they will take care of you. So I think all of this is important. That's how I looked at this whole plunge and was able to do what I'm doing now.
I really appreciate the colorful use of metaphor there. I think it helps kind of drive the point home. I mean, one important, so there were two things in particular I kind of took away from that are important things for entrepreneurs to consider if, they've got a family and are concerned about taking the plunge. One is, using your metaphor of the kite, having a strong support system from your family, your wife accepting what you do, realizing, this is a passion that you need to pursue, and supporting you in that manner, and your parents and her parents agreeing to be there for you guys in whatever way you need, as the next few years unfold and you learn where this is going. I also liked your point about being debt free, because the burden of debt can certainly compromise your decision making, and you can not count on success, but probably more reliably work towards success if you don't have burdensome debts affecting the decisions you make. So that's an important thing to point out as well. And I'm glad you said that. And you're very fortunate to have such a strong support system. I'm glad to hear that's the case. So another thing I wanted to pivot to, I remember when we first met, you told me a little bit about how you guys kind of delegated the roles. You have two co-founders and you're the CEO. And it was kind of an interesting story of how you guys settled on you being the CEO. I know that can sometimes be a source of contention among co-founders. It wasn't for you. It came to you guys pretty naturally. So it'd be great if you could share that story and tell about how you guys all settled on you being the CEO.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. I just wish other entrepreneurs don't do that. They'll be better prepared. So, so when the three of us, so Ritesh, Shahid, and myself are the co-founders. So we had complementary skills. To decide who would do what was pretty easy, right? So we decided all of that, how to build the company and what roles to take, very, very clear. And we were starting to pitch to investors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And investors, I still remember, and also, mind you, until now, the three of us have not met together yet face to face. the last 8 months of the entire ideation to now, it's all been over Google Meet and Zoom calls, right? So I'm not sure that met them.
This is entrepreneurship in the age of COVID. Pretty, pretty incredible.
Yeah. So if you realize that whole meeting and fighting it out has not happened, but thankfully we know each other for 8 years. So I think it was relatively easy to ideate and brainstorm over Zoom and WhatsApp calls and whatnot. So while we had done a previous startup together, we weren't founders. We were only part of the founding team. So I think relatively easier. But this time we were co-founders. So it was during an investment pitch. So the investors, and it was a pretty late night call for me in Singapore at about 1 a.m. in the morning, I guess, and having the discussion. And suddenly the potential investor at that point is like, who is the CEO of the three of you? And all three of us are like, we froze, right? We didn't know how to respond to that question, right? We were wondering, we shouldn't be conflicting each other. And because that's a red flag for the investor, kind of thing. So we didn't know what to do. We were patiently waiting. And then the magic happened. So Ritesh, my co-founder, said that he's going to be accepting or be okay with the fact that I have to be the CEO. And then my co-founder Chait stepped in and said, I'll go next, and I want Sethu to be the CEO as well. And then the investor asked me, Sethu, are you going to be the CEO? And I'm like, if they want me to be, then I'd be.
You kind of have to after that happened.
Exactly. So, but so it was interesting. I didn't know how to respond to that. Honestly, it wasn't this classy as I responded. By the way, I'm not going to say what I told there. But hey, I think the investor said, okay, at least I'm seeing alignment. It was clearly visible. You guys didn't prepare for it on your faces, but you guys quickly aligned, and that's the chemistry I like. So I think I'm far more confident now, and that's what happened. And then we immediately, the next day, we said, okay, let's start talking about all conflicts possible. Let's discuss the answers for it and keep it ready so that we don't, look stupid in the next investor call. And yeah, that's what happened.
Fortunately, it worked out. Maybe not recommended for other startup guys to kind of go off the cuff there because they may not get so fortunate to be as aligned. They might want to align beforehand just to make sure. But you guys were definitely fortunate that, as you put it, the chemistry was there. And it's kind of like a game. There's a game, kids will play here in the United States when we really don't want to do something, but one person in a group needs to do something. You say 1, 2, 3, not it, and touch it, and the last one to do it has to go do it. And that's kind of what I thought of when you guys decided on you being the CEO. But the good news is it's worked out. I mean, your CEO material, they understand that there's no conflict and everything's running smoothly. So that's it's a very serendipitous story, to be sure. Back to kind of Zluri as a company. I guess what's kind of on the roadmap? How are you looking to continue to add value and improve the product and the company?
Sure. So I think we're operating in a space that's quite easy to create great products, because in B2B, all they have to do is listen to customers and listen to managers. And I think all they have to do is matchmaking, right? Hey, the customer wants this. Hey, this part of the product roadmap. Can we try to align it so that we can deliver value to customers? And of course, I think if we keep listening to customers constantly, they help us innovate the product. I think it's straightforward as that. And for being in this space the last 10 plus years, I think I know that as well. So I think from that aspect, customers have already started giving a lot of inputs and feedback, which we're already working on right now. So to me, anything that you're doing with what the customer's inputs are, it probably applies to 10 more other customers as well. And if you ask them, say, who do you think has this problem, they'll refer you, and you can just go take it to them as well. I think it makes the life easier. And that's what we're pretty much doing. Pretty straightforward answer, but I think that's all it is.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, you guys, as I've pointed out numerous times, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you're still very early in it. So I guess there's not concrete plans to build this or that, but it's really just a matter of keeping your ears open, constructing those customer feedback loops and just, seeing, building what they want.
Yeah. So interestingly, to tell you again, the world of SaaS is what we're talking about. So in fact, the moment we decided this is how we're going to build the product, guess what? There is a SaaS solution for that as well, which is called Product Board. So where you have the product manager, the people in sales, and customer success, and also the customers can be on the same place together, like idea on the product. So it's just not an idea, but there is a product to even idea a product.
Okay. Just overlapping SaaS applications for everything and anything. So it's pretty crazy to think about how fast that it wasn't that long ago. We were still in the world of traditional on-premise computing. So this SaaS explosion that you keep alluding to is very profound. So it's just interesting to point that out, I thought. An important question that's definitely, I'm sure, on anybody's mind who's thinking of starting their own venture is how do you balance work and life? You got a young son and a wife and other social obligations. And of course, like anyone else, you want to have a good time with your life and not just work all the time. So how do you find time for everything or most of the things you want to do?
So interesting part is, I think the whole work-life balance, I don't really call it that way. I mean, because I call it work-life integration. So because as much as I'm working, I'm spending time on Instagram, I'm talking to my friends on WhatsApp, it's happening during the work time as well. So which means logging in, working, or sending emails in the night is also acceptable in that sense. But the interesting part is my son doesn't like using mobile phones. So which means you have to spend time with the, have to keep mobile phones separately. So I think the whole digital detox, he helps me give that. It gets very, very easy. And all I do is just spend 2 hours in a day with him. Doesn't matter which part of the day, but spend 2 hours in a day. I think as long as I take care of them, I feel less guilty of that day. And that's what I do. And I think mostly when I'm too much into work, my wife dropped a message saying that, hey, you know what, it's too much time you're not taking a break, step out. And I think that's what we do. We keep pushing and pulling each other. And I think it works well. To me, the fact that there's too much of work I've done and not spend much on other things hasn't happened because thankfully we do take that detoxes every now and then. And I've realized that from day one, and I've told the same thing to my co-founders as well. It's important you exercise, it's important you take the breaks, not fully work. Otherwise, we'll be dead by the time the game starts. So, yeah.
Interesting. All right, you said your son is the one who likes to get off screens and helps you unplug. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't know what it's like in India. In the United States, parents would love that, I'm sure. Kids are on screens on the time, on their screens all the time. Might have to talk with you offline about how you made that happen, because I could probably turn that into a business idea. But nonetheless, interesting perspective there. Definitely force yourself to unplug, and I like how you worded it as work-life integration. It's not about balance. Here you do the work and then here you do your life. It's like you kind of seamlessly flow, maybe, because the demands of entrepreneurship can be unpredictable. Sometimes you might have to get up to take a call or whatever. So how do you go from, what you're doing in your life apart from work right into taking that and then unplug again and go right back into, your time. So that's, I guess, a more nuanced way to think of it.
Yeah. And I also think that it's more true in the post-COVID world. You're sitting in the living room taking office calls, again coming and playing there with your son. I think it's all happening in the same place. I think integration is far more than ever it was.
Yeah. Now, someone else I interviewed, the first interview I did actually mentioned, part of what's helped balance work and life more integrated, as you put it, is the fact that we're all doing things remotely. Definitely saves us time on commuting and, be more efficient in how we work because, we're not cut off during that time from our work for the most part while we're commuting. So, that's definitely a very recent and profound change to the whole work-life balance or integration that entrepreneurs experience. I'm curious, do you have any good? You mentioned there being kind of a steep learning curve earlier about around getting whether it's going through terms of service, pitching to investors. I'm just kind of not necessarily on that specifically, but for dealing with any learning curves or just getting ready for the experience of being an entrepreneur. Are there any websites, books, resources you recommend?
So I think so two things, right? So I think whoever has started up, whoever I've spoken to, always had this intention to start up at the back of the mind over a few years. Pop up straight away one day. I had a great idea, let me start up. I think you fizzle out even before you get to the journey, right? So I think make sure you have a burning desire to start up, uh, and eventually all the things that helps you become a better entrepreneur would come and reach you. Like I said to you,
Mm,
right? Of the whole, I mean, whole subscription came and hit me, but can it become an idea and a startup that's fun worthy and all of that happened later, right? But the whole idea to start up and create our own company was always in the three of our heads for a long time to come. But in fact, interesting part is the three of us never spoke about starting up before, by the way. We all wanted to start up in our individual capacity, but never together. But it's an
mm,
idea together, right? So I think no particular resource I would recommend, but make sure if you have that burning desire to start up, things will reach you, and I think you will
mm.
start also looking for stuff to read around those lines. So if at all there's one book I recommend for people to read, then it's The Shoe Dog, the story of how Nike was born and what it became eventually.
Okay.
And in fact, one line, because okay, it's not a technology company. Anybody could have built Nike, honestly put, because they didn't have any particular IP because they're initially selling shoes from Japan. That's all they were doing.
Mm,
And eventually, when the whole deal fell through, is when they came with their own branding as well. So different things around that. Right? They had pivots in the day before it was called a pivot. So when Phil Knight was going and pitching to investors before the IPO, right? One of the lines that he said stood with me, and this is a book I read about 3 years ago, and it still stays fresh. One particular line, and it says, "The cowards never started. The weak died along the way, and today that leaves us, ladies and gentlemen, just us." And that's his pitch during his IPO pitch to all investors. So that's what I would say. So you got to be standing till the end. And the idea should be in your head for a long time, and then everything will reach you automatically.
It's an interesting pitch, not one I probably associate with shoes and sports apparel, but I guess that's why they're selling billions of dollars of it every year. So cool story. Thanks for sharing your perspective on that. I guess just the last question I have is just kind of a general. I mean, do you have any parting words of advice for anyone, or either already on their entrepreneurial journey or thinking of starting one?
So one thing that happens when you're trying to start up is you have a great idea, but if you go Google for like 2 minutes, you would realize that idea is already taken by someone. So people
Mm-hmm.
tend to think, oh, my idea is not original. So I'm going to start up. Somebody's done that. So one of the lessons I've had is whatever you're thinking to do is already done by someone. That's a reality. There is nothing
Mm-hmm.
so unique you can do by yourself. All that you can do is to do something better than what it is. As long as you come to terms with that, I think you can become a better entrepreneur. I think if you keep on searching for new ideas, you're never going to start up because there is no such thing called as new idea.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point too, because it's counterintuitive, right? People will see that something's being done and be like, "Well, that's it. I can't do it." But if anything, you should counterintuitively understand that's a good thing to see that someone has kind of done what you're thinking of, because that's proof that there's value, that people are, if it's successful business already exists for that. That's proof that you can make money off it. You can make a business off of it. And there are plenty of examples of this going on. Google was not the first search engine. Facebook was not the first social media platform. Lyft obviously followed Uber. And what do they really do that Uber doesn't? I mean, sometimes people switch back and forth maybe to get a better price, but it's not, even that much different. Snapchat, what is it? How profoundly different is it from Instagram? They just gave you a kind of a new experience by making the pictures disappear, which now Instagram does with their stories. So yeah, I think that's a very profound piece of advice to not, an important lesson there is not to be too concerned with originality. Just if you got an idea and there is value in it, because something pre-exists, just think about how you can make it better, add depth or breadth of service, and you can get a winning idea out of it.
Sure. In fact, I have one point to add to that as well, Eric. So
Please.
reason is because in my previous startup, I made a mistake. So I went and said, so we were early. So what we were trying to do was to bring technology into corporate learning space. Corporate learning
Mm,
is already dull and boring. So we try to bring in technology to make it fun and interesting, right? So we thought
sure.
we were the company out there. So every pitch of mine to customers was about how unique we were. Everybody said, awesome, right? But nobody placed a dollar with us. And later I realized that people, when they want to adopt something, they want to adopt something that's marginally better than what they have, and not something that's completely new, because then that's a whole new
Mm.
risk, and that could land them in trouble, right? So they want to play safe. So it's only when I understood that and I said, hey, you already have a boring stuff. By buying our product, you can make it marginally better for you. It can become interesting for you. Then people started buying in tons. Until then, it wasn't. So that ties back to the fact that the startup doesn't have to be completely original, because then it's going to be hard to sell as well. Something
Yeah.
marginally better, selling easy.
People may not understand you are actually providing a value, that they seek fulfillment for on a daily basis. If you're giving them something new, they won't identify it really with the concept of, what they purchase already. So that's an interesting point. They don't, it's a slightly better mousetrap, not a whole newfangled thing that kills every pest in existence. Although that sounds amazing, but so maybe in my ramblings I'm not making the best metaphor here, but I get the point. Don't again, to use maybe some hackneyed corporate jargon, don't boil the ocean. Look for just incremental ways to improve, and you'll capture customer interest that way.
That's right.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for leaving us with that last point. I think it was a very important point to make. So I'm really glad you thought of that and decided to share it. Ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentleman singular, since there aren't too many of you out there yet. Sethu from Zluri, software asset management platform, just recently launched. You did announce the launch, correct? Or is that still coming up soon? I believe
We
you
did
did it
also
this month.
launch for pilot customers.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, look out for them. Big and important things definitely on the horizon for Zluri. Sethu, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric, for your time as well. This was a great interview.
Okay.